join us. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started in just 1 or 2 more minutes once we let everybody get into the room. But it's really nice to see all your, well, we can't see your faces, but to see all your names in the chat. All right. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jennifer Sobel. I'm the founder and the executive director of the Illinois Prison Project. And I'm really humbled and honored to be able to welcome to you all to this really, really special event. One that is only possible thanks to years of work by some incredibly dedicated and talented advocates, survivors, and organizers, some of whom you'll hear from tonight, as the Illinois Prison Project formally launches the Women and Survivors Project. The Illinois Prison Project, as some of you guys know, is a newer legal organization, and we are singularly devoted to creating pathways for people to get out of prison. We represent incarcerated people in commutation proceedings and in administrative proceedings. We do work to educate communities about the harms of our criminal legal and prison systems. And we advocate for reforms that would release people from prison. Although we're only about 1.5 years old, our work has resulted in the freedom of 36 people. We've expanded the existing tools for releasing incarcerated people in Illinois, and we are forging new ways for people to come home as we speak. But tonight is really special because tonight we're delighted to formally launch the Women and Survivors Project. And if it's okay for me to speak on behalf of my entire team, it is impossible to overstate how thrilled we are about this revolutionary and crucial work. This project was dreamed up, worked up, and will be headed up by Rachel White-Domain, an expert in the social and legal issues that affect women in prison. As you'll soon see, or if you already know her, Rachel is a brilliant, committed, and creative lawyer who's spent years fighting for and alongside incarcerated women and survivors of gender-based violence, many of whom are incarcerated because of the abuse they've suffered, often at the hands of their partners. Her groundbreaking work on behalf of incarcerated women and survivors of gender-based violence challenges traditional notions of victimhood and sits at the cross-section of domestic violence work and abolition. I'm so excited to hear her talk about her incredible work and her vision and the future. But first, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Professor Deana Lewis, who will be moderating our conversation tonight. Professor Lewis's scholarly and activist work focuses on trans and non-trans Black women and girls who experience state violence. Her research interests include Black girlhood studies, the school to prison nexus, and youth incarceration. More specifically, Professor Lewis is interested in Black girls' experiences with school discipline and the school to prison pipeline, and how their experiences have been left out of the discourses about youth incarceration in general. Outside of academia and her work, Professor Lewis is a member of Love and Protect, a grassroots collective dedicated to supporting women, trans, and gender non-binary people of color who are criminalized or harmed by state and interpersonal violence. She's also a founding member of the Just Practice Collaborative, whose purpose is to build communities' capacities to effectively and with empathy respond to intimate partner violence and sexual assault without relying primarily on police or other state-based systems. Additionally, Professor Lewis participates in the work of Survived and Punished and the Chicago Community Bond Fund. We're so very appreciative that she's moderating this event tonight. Thank you in advance so much to our incredible speakers, to Rachel for launching this important work, and to all of you for coming and supporting us today. I hope you all enjoy. I'll now give you Professor Deana Lewis.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It is an honor to be here with these outstanding people to listen and to learn from them and to take action in order to support the freedom, the liberation of our people. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend, my comrade, Mariame Kaba. Mariame is an organizer, educator, and curator who is active in movements for racial, gender, and transformative justice. She is the founder and director of Project NIA, a grassroots abolitionist organization with a vision to end youth incarceration. Mariame is currently a researcher at Interrupting Criminalization, Research and Action at the Barnard Center for Research on Women, a project she co-founded with Andrea Ritchie in 2018. Mariame has co-founded multiple other organizations, and I would actually venture to say hundreds of organizations and projects over the years, including We Charge Genocide, the Chicago Freedom School, the Chicago Task Force on Violence Against Girls and Young Women, Love and Protect, the Just Practice Collaborative, and Survived and Punished. Her newest book, We Do This Till We Free Us, Abolitionist Organizing and Transforming Justice, is available now for pre-order and will be dropping in just a few days. So I highly suggest you get those pre-orders in. We'll drop the link in the chat so that you can go ahead and order it. And yeah, enjoy it. Mariame's leadership, organizing, and influence extend widely, across the United States, across the globe. She has influence and supported countless numbers of people and orgs, and she offers a radical analysis that influences how people think and respond to how violence, prisons, and policing affect the lives of people of color. So please welcome Mariame in your own Zoom type of way, and I'm going to pass it on to Mariame.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deana, for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to join in this wonderful launch event for a project that I could not be more excited about. Thank you to Rachel for inviting me to share just a few words with you today. And as I've kind of been in a constant work mode and have been working and burning the clock. And when I was asked to do this, my initial thought was, how am I gonna do one more thing? And then I thought about it and I was like, I have to do this thing. So again, really happy to be here today. So I was 13 years old when a TV movie called The Burning Bed aired. Some of you might remember that book and then the movie, the TV movie that came out. I think it came out like in 1984 or something. The film was loosely based on the life of Francine Hughes, who endured 13 years of horrific abuse from her husband before divorcing him. He continued to abuse her after the divorce. Francine had repeatedly called the cops, who did nothing to help her, which should sound very familiar to some of you. Finally, she took matters into her own hands to stop the abuse. One night after he had beaten and raped her again, and then fallen asleep, she put three of her children in a car, poured gasoline around her ex-husband's bed, and lit a match. I was thinking about all the things that had happened to me, all the times he had hurt me, how he had hurt the kids, Francine told People magazine. I stood still for a moment, hesitating, and a voice urged me on. It whispered, do it, do it, do it. She escaped that night with three of her children in tow, and she went straight and turned herself in to law enforcement. She was subsequently arrested and charged with murder. The Burning Bed was a sensation in the mid-'80s. Francine was acquitted due to a temporary insanity claim. But the reality actually is that women who kill their abusive partners are often severely punished for this by the criminal legal system. So Francine's case was actually one of the exceptions to the rule. You'll hear more about that later today. So the Burning Bed was really tucked away in the back of my mind until I came to consciousness about racialized gender violence years later in college. I worked at the Women's Center on campus doing sexual assault prevention workshops. And after graduation, I worked at Sanctuary for Families in New York City, which is the largest private domestic violence organization in the city. I moved on to spend years both volunteering and working in domestic violence and rape crisis organizations. But over the years, I became more and more alienated from my work in those spaces because the things that survivors wanted and said they needed most weren't what I could offer. I also started seeing many more instances where people incarcerated in women's prisons in particular were survivors of violence, but they weren't taken into consideration by funded domestic violence and sexual assault organizations. And I realized that these particular people in women's prisons were being criminalized for survival, for taking actions that would actually preserve their lives. And that really did not sit well with me at all. So I started writing to incarcerated survivors around 1996. And that was because I learned of the work of the Michigan Women's Justice and Clemency Project. And it was through their work that I started writing to a woman named Juanita Thomas. On July 28, 1979, Juanita Thomas killed Willie Hammond as she escaped his physical and sexual attacks. I should tell you about this next is trigger warning in general for my remarks today. Prior to that night, Juanita Thomas had endured several years of abuse, including beatings and verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical and verbal threats against her life, threats of sexual violence against her children, and general economic coercion. The night of July 28, 1979, Juanita and Hammond had come back from a party. On her bed, Juanita refused to perform oral sex on Hammond. And according to Juanita Thomas, he said, "You will do it." And then she says, "He hit me and was bringing his cock near my mouth, and I was laying on my back. He reached on the dresser, which was near the bed, and there was a letter opener on it. And he got the letter opener, and I reached under the bed where I had hidden a butcher knife weeks before, and just started to hit him again and again." After an inadequate and biased trial, Thomas was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. She spent 18 and a half years in prison until she was released from Michigan's Coldwater prison after working with law professor Andrea Lyon and her students, who uncovered that evidence that would have helped Thomas was destroyed by the prosecution. Thanks to Juanita's persistence and courage and that of her supporters, she was released from prison in 1998. So when I was writing to Juanita, it was near the end of the fight that she'd been having for years before to get free, to free herself. And I learned a lot through our correspondences about what it felt like to be incarcerated for long periods of time, for all the years she'd been in there, how it felt to feel like you did what you needed to do to survive and you were still punished for surviving. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me around the concept of criminalized survival. In 1913, Mary Wilson was charged with murder. She was arrested on February 9th in San Antonio, Texas, for killing a trooper named Sergeant Olaf Olson. Sheriff John W. Tobin said that she had confessed, and she said that the soldier, Olaf Olson, had threatened her. And when she tried to flee to a friend's home, Olson followed her and grabbed her. Mary was scared, and she thought that, quote, he intended to do her bodily injury. She then, quote, drew a revolver and shot him. And she told authorities that it was self-defense. Mary was held without bail. I came across Mary's story a few years ago when I was part of an effort to free Marissa Alexander as part of the Chicago Alliance to Free Marissa Alexander, CAFMA, which has now become Love and Protect. Marissa is a Black mother of 3 who had been convicted at the time and sentenced to 20 years in prison for firing a warning shot which hurt no one to ward off her abusive husband, who was not injured, who was not harmed, but she did get away until she didn't, when she got arrested. After successfully advocating for herself and a strong grassroots defense campaign, Marissa is now free and working to support other criminalized survivors. So Mary's story was briefly documented by Reverend Elijah Clarence Branch in a book titled Judge Lynch's Court in America, The Number of Negro Convicts in Prison in America, which I ran across when I was doing research. That book was published in 1913, the same year that Mary Wilson's case occurred. Reverend Branch in that book republished an article from the Houston Chronicle about Mary's story, and he added his own short commentary. He said, "A white man was killed and a Negro woman arrested. What was it? It was only a case of social equality. What right did he have in her room? The white people are burning Negro men about white women unidentified. Why not let the Negro women protect themselves? Do any honest set of men, regardless to color, say he had any right in this woman's room? The white people will harp on the separation of the races until a white man is killed about a Negro woman. She had a legal right to protect herself and home." So Branch assumes that Olson was unwanted in Mary's home. He suggests that she had a legal right to self-defense, right? Remember, he's writing this in 1913. I searched and I found the original article, and there was very little information provided. Who was Mary Wilson? Did she know Olaf Olson, or were they strangers? Were they perhaps in an intimate relationship? Had there been a previous history of interpersonal violence at his hands? Did she buy the gun for protection against him? I was really intrigued and curious to know more. History is replete with stories of women, particularly of color, both trans and non-trans, who were precluded from invoking self-defense in the face of violence. In fact, too many have been and still are criminalized for protecting themselves. You'll hear from a couple of them today. I wanted really to know what Mary's fate was. Was she convicted of murdering Olson? Was she executed? This happened in San Antonio, Texas, early 20th century. Did she spend the rest of her life in prison? What happened to Mary Wilson? You're all going to have to wait a little longer for some answers to these questions as I continue to do research about Mary and her case. What's important for tonight, for this celebration of the launch of the Women and Survivors Project, is that Mary's story in 1913 unfortunately continues to repeat itself into the present. And there are still very few resources to support people who find themselves in Mary's legal situation, or in Francine's, or in Juanita's. Carcerality, right, is a strategy that does not attend to the root causes of violence or other social problems. Rather, it simply disposes of those individuals that represent these problems. And what we know about criminalization is that in the US, it orders many people's lives. And this is particularly true for Black and Indigenous people in this country. In 2016, I and others co-founded Survived and Punished, which is a national coalition that includes survivors, organizers, victim advocates, legal advocates and attorneys, policy experts, scholars, and currently and formerly incarcerated people. S&P organizes to decriminalize efforts to survive domestic and sexual violence, support and free criminalized survivors, and abolish gender violence, policing, prisons, and deportations. SNP has affiliates in New York, in Chicago, and in California. And, it was founded by organizers from the Stand With None He Defense Campaign, the California Coalition for Women's Prisoners, Love and Protect, which was then known as the Chicago Alliance to Free Marissa Alexander, and the National Free Marissa Now mobilization campaign. Our work has been rooted in the fact that racialized aspects of gender violence and gendered aspects of mass criminalization have generally been overlooked. The prison is gendered male, while domestic violence and sexual assault is racialized white. For many survivors, especially of color, the experiences of domestic violence and rape are inextricably linked with systems of incarceration, of policing, and of criminalization. As many as 94% of the population in some women's prisons have a history of having been abused before being caged. And once incarcerated, many cis women, trans women, gender nonconforming people, they experience sexual violence from guards and others. So they're re-traumatized over and over again because the prison itself is a serial rapist, as Dean Spade teaches us. The work of defense campaigns like Free Marissa Now, with Stand With None He, or Free Brescia, those campaigns, the work of them are centered around the experiences, as we've been organizing for the freedom of all criminalized survivors, to center their experiences within these defense campaigns in order for us to be able to do the things we want to do, which is free them from these cages and from these systems. A focus on how women and girls, cis and trans, and GNC folks experience violence by the state pushes us to consider more than lethal force as harmful. We have to include how people who are victims of interpersonal violence are criminalized by the state for defending their lives and for surviving. And our lens then becomes much, much wider, right? We believe that creating participatory defense campaigns to support the people made most vulnerable to criminalization is essential for educating the public, including prison reformers and abolitionists. Also, very important about we want to educate folks about the racial and gendered terror of criminalization and incarceration. And we know that campaigns which uplift and defend particularly Black women who are charged with violent acts, like Marissa and Brescia and Tewkunzi also were, that those are often the only means for securing their freedom. They are also necessary for popular education to strengthen our movements, both by informing and improving overall movement strategies and by educating to challenge false and damaging binaries that we use to describe incarcerated people, like violent and nonviolent, and innocent and guilty. All of that is exploded within survivor-focused defense campaigns. Defense campaigns can create new forms of learning and practice that are necessary for prison industrial complex abolition, which is the vision that I subscribe to in the world. By organizing to put campaigns like those supporting people in immigrant detention, those criminalized for sex work, those targeted by transphobic violence in conversation with each other, we can better understand how anti-Black, gendered violence and criminalization actually operate. So I am really looking forward to hearing from Tewkunzi and from Vickie tonight as they narrate their experiences and give us our marching orders to support others who are still locked up and or fighting currently their cases. I hope that you'll all support the Women and Survivors Project because it is so needed and it's so necessary. And there are so few resources around the country, and they are going to be one of the few. I hope that we're going to have many more over the years, but we've got to push to make this work and to make this a success. And so I want to say that tonight I'm going to pledge to donate $5,000 to the project, and that I hope that others of you who can and want to will join me in giving as generously as you can to this critical and necessary work. These kinds of spaces and organizations are critical. They're so, so important. And I hope if my words leave you with anything at all today, it's that the history is there. We see the history repeating itself, or at least echoing throughout time. And we also see that the resources needed to support people are few. They were few in 1913, almost non-existent. They were few in 1977, when Francine killed her husband. They were few, for Juanita in 1979, and they were few for Tewkunzi, and they were few for Vickie. And we can't allow that to continue. We have to support survivors, really do that. We have to do that concretely. We have to do that structurally, and we have to make the changes necessary so that this doesn't continue happening. So thank you so much for inviting me again. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to listen to what happens next.
Thank you so much, Mariame. It's always a pleasure to learn from and be in community with you. And thank you also for your continued generosity and with that generous donation to IPP. And I wanted to say a really quick comment on something Mariame mentioned, the trigger warning. The stories of the women that Mariame told and the stories you're going to hear tonight can be hard to hear. And it's absolutely necessary that we listen. It's so important to listen and to think and to act. And so I invite you to ask yourself, like, how dare we not protect these Black women? How dare we allow the state to cage people for defending themselves, for trying to help themselves? How do we stop this? And what can we do? And with that, food for thought, I'm going to introduce a person who is working to end this unfounded imprisonment and criminalization, Rachel White-Domain. Rachel will serve as the director of Illinois Prison Project's Women and Survivors Project. Rachel is an attorney who specializes in representing incarcerated, gender-based violence survivors. She's a recognized expert on raising and addressing issues related to gender-based violence in the context of late-stage criminal defense proceedings, including commutation, post-conviction, and resentencing cases, as well as trauma-informed legal advocacy and interviewing. Rachel has also provided legal representation to incarcerated mothers in family law matters as a pro bono attorney with Chicago Legal Advocacy for Incarcerated Mothers, also known as CLAIM, which later became a program of Cabrini Green Legal Aid. Rachel previously served as the policy director for the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. And in that role, she managed a national policy agenda to address systemic issues impacting domestic violence survivors experiencing trauma-related mental health and substance use conditions. Rachel's done a lot. She is amazing. She also developed and trained nationally on the Trauma-Informed Legal Advocacy Project, the first comprehensive national training module designed for domestic violence legal advocates and lawyers seeking to apply trauma-informed approach to their work. She also knows her stuff. Rachel is a movement lawyer and serves as a board member of the Chicago chapter of the National Lawyers Guild and as a volunteer attorney with the NLG's Mass Defense Committee, coordinating legal support for people arrested during protests. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you so much, Deana, and thanks, Mariame. I am just so incredibly and continuously humbled by both of you and all of you on this call. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight. All day today, I have been thinking about how this event tonight is a tiny moment of celebration, a tiny and brave declaration of victory in the midst of what was a very hard and difficult year. But also in the midst of a much longer freedom struggle that has stretched over years and decades. So I'm so grateful to Mariame Kaba for illustrating so profoundly some of that struggle And I'm also so excited to hear from Vickie, Quinn, and Tewkunzi Green shortly, who will talk to you about their personal journeys and also their analysis of this historical moment and where we are going from here. Because make no mistake, this is a movement, and it's a special event tonight because so many people on this call are involved and continue to be part of that movement, whether as activists, organizers, lawyers, people who are directly impacted, fighting for themselves, fighting for their loved ones, our supporters, and our funders for this work. This past year has been absolutely devastating for so many people who I know and care about, for so many of my clients trapped in prison and unable to protect themselves during this deadly pandemic, and their loved ones who are at home worrying about them. Prisons were already a humanitarian crisis. They always have been. Yet when COVID hit, it made it devastatingly worse. As many have said, COVID exposed the worst of what was already inhumane and unworkable in our society. This has been a year of fear and tragedy for people who are incarcerated or who have loved ones inside. But this tragedy and this short moment tonight of hope within that tragedy reminds me of the importance of never forgetting that this struggle is a long haul. The work of ending the criminalization of survivors, the incarceration of women, of mothers, of parents, grandparents, and caretakers, of all human beings. The work of abolition is a movement. And there are moments and days and years of loss and tragedy. And there are moments and days and years of success and victory and forward momentum. And we are in just such a moment, however brief it may be tonight, of celebration, a night of celebrating bravely our success together here, despite the ongoing tragedy that surrounds us. So I wanted to talk tonight about how we got here and where we are going. There are many stories to answer that question, and I just have one of them. So I hope that you listened carefully to Mariame Kaba, and I hope that you will listen carefully to Tewkunzi Green and Vickie Quinn as they tell you the same but different stories about how we got here in this historical time of prisons, this historical time of mass incarceration, but also this time of struggle and hope. Because things are changing. Things are possible today that were not possible when I began doing this work, that were not possible when others before me began doing this work. This is just one moment of victory tonight within a much broader movement for freedom and abolition, a movement that many people are part of, and I hope will continue to be part of. The launch of the Women and Survivors Project is the culmination of over 10 years of my work with incarcerated women and survivors, most of which until a few years ago was pro bono work, volunteer work that I did after my day job. I started working with incarcerated women in law school in 2009 under the mentorship of attorney Margaret Byrne and law professor Mary Becker of the Illinois Clemency Project for Battered Women. For each of the couple of commutation cases that I took, there were hundreds more women who would write and say that they needed help. The letters literally stacked up. The more I learned from their incredible stories and analysis with the more women that I worked with, the more I understood the desperate need for legal support for this struggle. And here we have to understand that almost no one in prison has an attorney helping them. Our legal system is set up such that once someone is convicted, it is very, very difficult by design for them to be released. And incarcerated women had even fewer resources. And that's because the very few resources that did exist for people who were convicted years or decades in the past were primarily for people with traditional claims of innocence. So people who could be proven innocent legally and scientifically based on hard science, such as DNA claims. That work is incredibly important. However, most incarcerated women, and in fact, most incarcerated people do not have traditional innocence claims. Statistically, when women do kill another person, women are more likely to kill someone who they know. The issue is almost never one of mistaken identity in these cases. The issue is usually much more complex. After graduating law school in 2010, I won a couple of clemency cases. These were complicated cases that I had worked on for years, one at a time on weekends. Like a lot of the important organizing and legal work done in the world, it was work that I had been doing pro bono, volunteer, just because it needed to be done. After a couple of wins, I wanted to take another case, so I scheduled interviews with incarcerated women, including Tewkunzi Green. I was honored to accept her case and for her to accept my offer of representation. But at the same time, I turned down at least 2 other women I had interviewed. Lack of resources. And while I represented Tewkunzi over the next several years, I constantly continued to receive letters and requests for help that went completely unanswered. Working with Tewkunzi inspired me to do more. I had a good job working as a policy lawyer in the domestic violence field, but more and more, I just wanted to do the work to help people get free. I also saw that criminalized survivors existed in the crux of a place that was under-recognized, both in the domestic violence field, where incarcerated survivors are generally not seen as, quote, real victims, unquote, and by the criminal defense field, where there simply is not enough expertise in gender-based violence and how it affects defendants. But this is not an issue of criminalized survivors falling through the cracks. The very fact of the criminalization of survivors of gender-based violence illustrates one of the many contradictions of relying on the criminal justice system to keep us safe. So in 2017, I applied for an Equal Justice Works fellowship. I was extremely lucky to be chosen and to be sponsored by the Albert and Ann Mansfield Family Foundation. As an Equal Justice Works Fellow, I received 2 years of funding to work full-time representing incarcerated survivors, and I was graciously hosted at Cabrini Green Legal Aid in Chicago. I quit my full-time job, a good job, an equally important and critical job, working as a policy director for a national domestic violence organization, and I literally contacted women who I had said no to for years and offered to be their attorney. Women who I had interviewed years ago and who had just waited for an attorney for all of that time. In 2020, as the fellowship funding for the project was coming to a close, the project might just have been over. I had clients whose cases I may have just had to wrap up or continue to the end and not take any more. But the Illinois Prison Project, a new organization itself, offered the project a permanent home. This was possible, first and foremost, due to the tremendous generosity and faith of the Mansfield Foundation, which reached out and offered to continue funding the project as we moved to Illinois Prison Project. As a funder, they believed in the work before anyone else did, and their unwavering faith in me and in this work has literally made my being here possible. It has literally made the freedom of women like Tewkunzi and Vickie, who are here tonight, possible. There are not enough words of gratitude for you. The Mansfield Foundation was quickly joined by a few other funders willing to help make the Women and Survivors Project happen, including the Chicago Foundation for Women and the Warrior Goddess Project. It is no exaggeration that the launch of this project is a historical moment. As Mariame talked about, there are very, very few programs like this in the country. The Women and Survivors Project, is truly unique in the country. While the incarceration of women has disproportionately skyrocketed in recent decades, and survivors of violence continue to be punished for acting in self-defense or otherwise to survive gender-based violence, there are very few projects that focus specifically on this combination of issues. I began at Illinois Prison Project in June of 2020, in the midst of the pandemic. IPP is a young organization, small and scrappy, and it could not be a better home for this work. At this point, as in right now, the organization Illinois Prison Project as a whole has existed during the pandemic for longer than it existed without a pandemic going on. So in the first several months of this project, of the Women and Survivors Project, we focused primarily on the threat that COVID posed to incarcerated women, especially elderly women and those with medical conditions, winning the release of 3 women whose age and medical history made them especially high risk. That work continues. The Illinois Prison Project will also and primarily represent incarcerated survivors like Tewkunzi Green, survivors who are incarcerated for crimes related to surviving abuse, including self-defense, in post-conviction, commutation, and resentencing matters. Most of these survivors are serving long sentences, usually between 20 years and life in prison, for acting in self-defense or after being forced or coerced to participate in the conduct of their abusive partner. The Women and Survivors Project will also include a caregivers campaign through which we will represent incarcerated caregivers who are serving for low-level felonies, helping them to achieve administrative early releases, such as through sentencing credits or transfers to home detention. The Caregivers Campaign reflects our awareness that 80% of incarcerated women were primary caregivers before their incarceration, meaning that they were separated from children and other family members at the time that they were arrested. And I'm so excited to announce that officially as of yesterday, the Caregivers Campaign will be in partnership with the Women's Justice Institute, which will provide family law services to this same group of incarcerated caregivers, particularly incarcerated mothers. As a movement lawyer, I believe that the role of an attorney is to support social justice movements. I know how lucky I am to fight alongside women like Tewkunzi Green and Vickie Quinn, alongside Deana Lewis, Mariame Kaba, all of the brilliant organizers with Love and Protect and Survived and Punished. And I know how lucky I am to have support from all of you. Thank you for being here, and please continue to follow our work and to be part of this movement. I'll turn it back to Deana.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You are an inspiration. You're amazing. Many more adjectives. We're lucky to have you in this fight. We are also grateful for IPP and the Women and Survivors Project. We're lucky to have your hard work, diligence, and care. Now I would like to invite Tewkunzi and Vickie to turn on their videos so we can begin our conversation. While they join us and we see their amazing faces, I am just going to let you know that I'm gonna facilitate a conversation for about 45 minutes. Afterwards, we'll take some questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. Someone will be collecting them and we'll hopefully be able to answer a few. First, I'm going to introduce both Tewkunzi and Vickie. And I need to tell you, like I said, I was honored at the beginning of this, and you can't feel the emotion radiating off of me right now. It is my absolute pleasure, beyond pleasure, to be even virtually in this room with my friend and comrade Tewkunzi Green. Tewkunzi Green is a loving mother and passionate activist who works on issues including ending domestic violence, especially abuse during pregnancy, and on raising awareness about the harmful impacts of incarceration. She's a visual artist and a sought-after hairstylist, and I will also say an amazing writer. In 2007, Tewkunzi was incarcerated after she defended herself and her 6-month-old infant from her boyfriend's violent attack. Although she told police and prosecutors what happened, they did not believe her, and she was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 34 years in prison. Tewkunzi was represented by attorney Rachel White-Domain, who you just heard from, in Tewkunzi's fight for freedom. Tewkunzi and Rachel worked together on her case for 5 years. And during this time, Tewkunzi also had outside support from Love and Protect, Survived and Punished, and the friends she made through letter writing. And all of those folks organized on her behalf and with her. In November 2020, Tewkunzi was granted commutation to time served, and she was released, returning home to her now 14-year-old son to her beloved family, many of whom are on the call tonight. So, hey fam. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge, oh, I just did. How are you? Since her release, Tewkunzi has become an IPP ambassador, speaking on issues such as the incarceration of women, domestic violence, and the role of racism in mass incarceration. She has also engaged in organizing and support work with mothers whose sons have been incarcerated, providing advice on how to support their children while they are serving long prison sentences. She's also been working to organize with neighbors and community members to address violence in her community. So I know we're on Zoom, but if you can throw some love in the chat for Tewkunzi, thanking her for being here. We're lucky to have her and just glad that she is out and with us. Next, I am so pleased to introduce a person who I just recently met, and I'm lucky to have met her. In our relatively brief interactions, she has left a long-lasting impression on me, and I'm glad to be in community with Vickie Quinn and her daughter who's with her, Simone. Vickie Quinn is a loving mother and grandmother who helps her daughter Simone to run an at-home daycare. She is a community leader and fierce advocate for people experiencing addiction, and she chairs many of the Alcoholics Anonymous groups in her neighborhood. She also enjoys sewing, reading, cooking, gardening, and time with her family. In 2018, Vickie was arrested and sentenced to 6 years on charges of theft of less than $300. If you think that's asinine, you're absolutely right, it is. When COVID-19 hit the prisons, she was at high risk due to her age and medical history. With the help from the Illinois Prison Project, the IPP's partners at the Women's Justice Institute, and the tireless advocacy of her daughter, Simone, Vickie was released in July 2020. She returned home to her grandchildren and her family, many of whom are on the call tonight. So if you're noticing a theme, we're going to come back to the theme of family and support. So I want to say what's up to Vickie's family too. Hey, fam. Since her release, Vickie has also been an IPP ambassador, speaking on issues including how incarceration impacts families, as well as how addiction contributes to incarceration. So again, in your Zoom style audience, please show appreciation for Vickie and for Tewkunzi. Okay, so I'm gonna start with Vickie first, and then we're gonna move to Tewkunzi. And I wanna open space for the both of you to tell your stories. And so Vickie, you were sentenced to 6 years in prison for theft of under $300, right? As I mentioned before. And you were in prison when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And in total, you served a total of 18 months before you were released in July 2020. Can you add and tell us more about your story, please?
Yes. When I was first arrested, I was transferred from Oakland, where I lived, to Cook County. I stayed there 3 weeks, and then I was transferred to Logan. I stayed at Logan. It was horrible. I stayed at Logan for 2 weeks until I was transferred to Decatur. And I woke up one morning and I just said, I can't believe I'm here in prison. But I knew that I had to get up and start working on me. So I attended NA every Sunday. I went to AA for about 8 months, and then I became the chairperson. I opened up the doors every Saturday. I never missed NA, AA. I would go to crocheting classes, and I went to Moving On, all types of groups to help Vickie, to help me become a better person and understand where I made bad choices in life. And when the pandemic hit, it just came one day. I was working in the laundry room, and they didn't tell us anything. They just said, go to your rooms, and there was no social distancing. And the warden would come around and we would talk about what's going on and can we get some masks and stuff. And I just decided, we stayed in the room for like 8 or 9 months, you know, off and on. They would bring us lunch and dinner and breakfast. And And one day I just I saw a piece of paper saying to call the IPP, and I did. And this is where I am. I'm going to elaborate more on that later on.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Vickie. I appreciate it. Tewkunzi, I want to talk to you or hear more about your story, if you can add to your story. So, you know, I mentioned people know you were sentenced to 34 years in prison for first-degree murder, and you served 13 and a half before being released in November 2020. And one thing that strikes me and also angers me is, you know, you defended yourself and your child, and you told the police and prosecutors that you did, and they didn't believe you. And can you tell us just a little bit more, or just tell us as much as you want about your story, please?
Yes. First off, I had to give thanks to God, because it had been a long journey through everything that I went through. I have also been through some domestic issues for a year or two with him, and it's kind of like when you're growing up and you see domestics can go on in front of you or around you. It took a toll on my life as well. And the night that everything had happened, I just knew it was over for me. But some people didn't understand that it was a lot more going on behind closed doors. And to protect your life, to protect your child life at the time, it really have changed me, you know, with me going to jail and people picking on me and throwing shades at me due to the fact that they felt like I did something wrong. What happened behind closed doors that night, it was terrible. It could have been avoided, but people don't understand that whatsoever, that I was in a messed up state of mind, and it should never been led to a fight. I did my time, and those years that the prosecutor and nobody didn't want to believe me, I felt like it was just a time in my life that made me feel vulnerable, because you have somebody who had me in prison, in jail for almost 2 years, trying to tell my truth about
Tewkunzi, I think your microphone went out. There you go. We can hear you now.
it just those just being in prison for those almost 2 years, and I felt like I was being guilty before my trial date. I was found guilty before, just because I know a mother had lost her son, but I lost my son too for 13 and a half years. And the justice system didn't treat me fair at all. And that's the thing that I had to pull for being in a rocky relationship and trying to move on with my life, and someone didn't want to give up. But it was just, the 13 and a half years was very long to me. And I can't change nothing, but I can move forward to help other people to understand that domestic violence is very serious in this country. And we just to have somebody to hear me and to understand that what goes on behind closed door, people should never criticize a judge or take it however they want to take it, because it's only a matter of time when people just feel like you don't deserve to be out here in the world. And that's how someone made me feel. Someone made me feel for 13 and a half years as I didn't deserve a life with my son. I understand that you can't change or turn back the hands of time, but I had lost a lot too within 13 and a half years just from a 2-year rocky relationship of abuse.
Yeah.
But the system had failed me, and it took wonders. It took wonders from all of it. And I learned a valuable lesson from being in the courtroom to being in jail cells to being in prison cells, how they affect my life, what really got me that far, and why I should have left a long time ago before that night. But for somebody not to believe you, the judge, the DA, the state attorney, the police, whoever, you just can't find me guilty and you don't know nothing about me. And that's what happened to me that night. They had truly found me guilty ahead of time, keeping me from lowering my bonds and everything to come home to my child, just to satisfy someone else. My family would love to have been satisfied, and that was a hurtful soul to have to defend for your life because someone was beating on you, and you asked multiple times to just leave you alone. And I go about my business, you go about your business. But people don't see that. Only thing they see is what they want to see and hear. And I served my time 34 years. I didn't want to see 34 years. Didn't want to see 13 and a half. But by the grace of God, I was out of there. And I'm thankful. I'm so thankful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tewkunzi, for sharing that with us. And we're thankful that you're here with us. And you both bring up some really good points that I want to kind of hit on before we talk about other things. And I've, in our conversations, and through talking, listening to you, there are a few things that stick out to me, and it's really about thinking about other folks and acting for other folks. So not just focused on the self and what you need, but also thinking about what others need, what other type of support others need, and what you can do to help support them. And so, Vickie, Rachel told us about when you first got out, the first thing you asked Rachel on the phone was about all of the other women that were still in prison and who was going to help them. Can you, talk a bit more, like, as a Black woman, did you see similarities, or what similarities between your story and their stories did you see?
Hi. Just like Tewkunzi said, when I got there, we would give small groups meetings with a lot of the women on the unit, and we would open up about what brought us there. And there was a lot of abusive relationships, and a lot of drug using, alcohol using. They were missing their children. I was missing my children and grandchildren. Some of them children was lost in the system and they just didn't know where they were. The similarities I saw were we were all women. We were mothers, we were sisters, we were aunts, we were nieces, we were somebody's child. Our families wanted us home. Some of the families had given up on them, and we would talk about that. Some of them had no place to go, and we would talk about that also. But they were all there Majority of them are all there to better themselves, to not to find themselves, to make themselves better so that they can go home to their children, their mother, their brothers, their sisters, and become a positive component in life, in society, in their community. And I miss them. I think about them. Some of them didn't understand the system, the judicial system, why they were there. Like Tewkunzi and myself, I was born into abuse, which was so confusing. Just like a lot of them, they were coming from abuse. I've been in battered women's shelters a lot in my life, and I do know that you are not always abused by a male. And so we all worked together, me and my sisters in jail. We worked together and we prayed and we talked, and we just wanted to be better. Better, like I said, mom, sisters. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vickie. And there's a lot of love going on in the chat for both of you. And again, we're so lucky to have you both here to talk about your stories and just be great examples of how to be vulnerable, and also, stand in your truth and stand in your power. Tewkunzi, I want to go back to what you were saying about how the system, or so many people in the systems, failed you, and these systems that are supposed to, or we are told are supposed to protect us. Because in the video for this event, you made a really powerful statement, and I'm going to take this quote. You cannot just keep throwing away people and not understand them, just because you never lived the life that some have. Can you talk more about what you meant by that and how incarceration, you talked a little bit about this, but if you can expand a little bit more about how incarceration affected you as a Black woman?
It had affected me kind of in a different way. Like, some people get to this thing where they treat you like whatever you deserve to be treated. When I first got locked up, I was trying to find ways to understand, being an intake to being on ground and not letting people tell you whatever you want to hear, or just mislead you, misguide you through the prison system. Then you have, the staff who, you got some who will be so mean to you just because they live in whatever type of world. And my incarceration, it really kind of was a-okay, but it was at time where I felt like people was mistreating women as just whatever. And you have some people in prison that's very racist and who talk to women talk to you, downgrade you on a daily basis. And you have some who trying to encourage you through any and everything just to make your day a-okay. Me as the black woman that I am, I have heard a lot of Black women getting disrespected on a daily basis. You could not even really talk. But as far as like what I was meaning about, just because they don't know the life, where we live and where we come from, a lot of people don't. We can go in front of the judges, state attorney, just because they grew up in a nice house, or went to a nice school, or being in a nice neighborhood. They forget that it's another area in certain country that everybody can't afford to live the way that they can. You just can't criticize and judge other people and look down on people for to make yourself look good, because only if you live like some of us have, growing up struggling, families trying to raise each other, then they will understand how we felt as the people that we are today. I have learned a lot from my childhood and how they affected me as an adult. And we have a lot of people that say, oh, you was raised different. You don't know how I was raised. You don't know nothing about me besides you criticizing, judging me, and you trying to change my story to make you look good. You can lie to another person to make yourself look good. But when I said, just cause the life that I live, that some and some do not understand, I mean for the fact that when I was in that courthouse, I got judged before I was even sentenced. People did me so wrong just because someone lied in the courthouse to make themselves look good, to put shade on my name, my family name, to make it seem like everything was okay. Only if you knew what was going on in my household, you would understand on a daily basis that you cannot beat around the bush and tell people lies all day long. I had some people try to judge me just because of who my mother was. And that was very hurtful, because you don't know nothing about my mother. You don't know nothing about me. You don't know nothing about my family, period. And just, you can't judge a book by its cover whatsoever. And we have a lot of that going on today in America, where people try to judge you and just throw away the key on you. But you never sat down once to ask what's going on, or is there something that's in you up? You got these lawyers who try to protect you, and some of them ain't trying to get down to the nitty gritty to help you find your way to give you a lesser charge, or to get you out of that thing. And by the grace of God, I had a lawyer who fought, who understood me, who listened to me, versus before, where you didn't have nobody that was able to listen, to understand you, to be able to express the way that you came up as a young person, or to, give other people the advice that they need, to let people know that you can't just lie your way into anything. You cannot just tell people that, oh, she A-okay. You don't know nothing about me. So the thing is, they're not understanding me, and they're not understanding none of the people that they're just throwing away, right now. And it's sad. It's really sad, because I feel like a lot of people should deserve the truth about what's really going on, and you just throwing away people because of who their family might be, or the neighborhood, or how their name ring in the street, or whatever the case may be. But it's just sad. It's just sad that the justice system see, especially some Black women, they see it just as low down, depending on who our family. A family name can go a long way and can get a person caught up. And it's sad that the justice system had to be so biased to judge me based on who somebody else was in my family, and not understand me as the individual that I am, instead of whoever else that's as my family, or my friend, or the neighborhood, or just get a chance to get to know me. Let me tell my truth in front of you, because nobody else don't know me like me. And for you to just sit here and just think you could throw away a key on somebody, you don't know if how that person or what she might have went through for dear time. People sit in prison and they be so.
We lost your mic again, Tewkunzi. There we go. I think we have it back.
I didn't know if say, but I'm sorry. But it just, I didn't understand a lot of the things that was going on at the time. But then once I sat back and realized that it's just so hard to not understand, for somebody else not to understand you. But the way I live my life is different from what everybody else had lived in my family, around me, or however but they should just not do that to a lot of people. They does that because some women goes through that, you know, just because who they dad might be, or who they brother, or they cousin, they mom, or whoever. The justice system is so messed up. And when we get incarcerated, when you try to throw away the key on a person like me or any other woman in this world, you just degrading her as much as she was before she got locked up. We already live like a prison every day in life when we walk the streets or go places, however it may be. But there is so many people that don't understand, once we get locked up and incarcerated as the person that you are, sometimes it take your dignity away from you. Some people make you seem like you ignorant or you just dumb or whatever the case may be. But today I'm saying that I'm okay as the Black woman that I am. And I hope the justice system can start understand how the things that women are going through as a mother, as a child, as a friend, as a mentor, or just somebody that's out there that's struggling. You just can't keep throwing away the key on people who are going through things in their relationship, or you don't know where their state of mind might be at. So just enlighten and just try to understand better, instead of just thinking prison solve everything, because the people in prison don't care either. Thank you.
Thanks, Tewkunzi. I mean, you're bringing up a lot of what many of us in the audience who are prison abolitionists believe and fight for, and that's, we can't throw people away. We can't throw people away. We can't throw people away. And also you're both bringing up these points around like structural issues, structural problems of racism, sexism, misogyny, and also thinking about disinvesting from communities and poverty, and how the legal system, because I think somebody said in the chat, there's no justice in this system. And so how the legal system is made up of, or is bolstered by, racism, sexism, misogyny, and so are the prisons, because it is an integral part of the legal system. And this next thing I'm going to ask you about is related, and I know it's going to be difficult and painful to describe this, and you've begun to talk about it already, especially talking about your children, your other family members. And I'm going to start, Vickie, with you. And even when you were talking about the women in prison, how you said they felt lost, they felt alone, they had no family. And it seemed like it was a little bit different for you because you were separated, you had family, you were separated from your daughter and her two children, your grandchildren. And you mentioned in the video that was the kind of trailer for this event, that the effects on people who are incarcerated and their families creates this domino effect. Can you explain more about that domino effect and being separated from your family? And then also, I'm going to also then turn it over to Simone to get your thoughts too.
what I meant by the domino effect was, like I said, I also came from an abusive family and born into it. My mother was the abuser, and she would abuse my dad on a daily basis. I mean, really bad, blood, skin, and I took all that in, and I never talked about it. And I wonder why she was beating my dad. And then I'm the 8th child out of 11. And I don't know why she would beat me. Maybe because I protected him. I was that little kid that sat on my dad and told my mom, "You're not gonna keep hitting my dad." And I did that for years. I think until I got an adult. And I said myself, I'm not gonna abuse people. But I became the abusing. I became the person that people abused, men. And I ran on this warrant. What the 18 months I was incarcerated, I ran. And my daughter sitting here kept saying, "Mom, turn yourself in. You only have to do a year." But I was so afraid. I kept using. I lost my grandson. He was 11 years old 2 days before I was arrested on this charge. I felt devastated. Simone was on her honeymoon, and I gave her a call, and I said, "Simone, I'm going to jail." My daughter's daughter started cutting herself. That was so devastating to hear my 10-year-old granddaughter cutting herself because grandma was gone. I knew I could not be that person that was in jail, that went to jail. I had to change because I am not that person. I just made bad choices. I disappointed myself. I disappointed Simone, my son. I have 8 grandchildren in total. I don't want them to grow up doing the things that I did. That's why we go to counseling, because it is a domino effect. It really is. I don't want them growing up not being able to share their feelings and talk about it. That's what I meant by the domino effect. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And also thank you for, telling us more about what you're doing on the outside and that the family is participating in therapy. That's amazing. And also, bad choices doesn't mean you should be caged. And you're doing great things now. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But Simone, I want to ask you, so what were you experiencing while your mother was incarcerated?
Sure. Again, it was extremely difficult for me because I had never, been away from her. As she stated earlier, I have 2 daughters. One is 12 and one is almost 4. At the time of my mother's incarceration, my 12-year-old was 10, and then my 4-year-old was almost 2. But my oldest daughter, it was really hard for her because, my mother is like her second mom, grandma, my mother, which is her grandmother, was always around. And, my mother and her enjoyed making cookies and, making recipes. And to hear my daughter come to me, my mother got arrested in August of 2018. My oldest daughter's birthday is in November. And honestly, for the longest time, I didn't share with her how long the sentencing my mother got, because I knew that would just hurt her. She just knew, as the weeks went on, I'm like, well, maybe a couple more months, grandma will be home. But she would ask, around her birthday, do you think grandma's going to be home before my birthday? And then it was, do you think she'll be home before Christmas? And that to me was hard to I was trying to shelter her from that part. She knew something was going on. She knew, all she knew was, her grandmother was not here. My youngest daughter, of course, didn't understand as much because she wasn't even 2 yet, but it was difficult because again, I didn't, my main thing is my mother in a place where she's safe. My mother has a heart of gold. Like she would, give anything, that she would give the person a shirt off her back. And I know going to a place like that, that's not always the person that, you can be, because it's from my perspective of what I know about, women that are incarcerated, even to what Tewkunzi said, there's this, stigma around, you only the tough will survive, and you have to, have this certain type of persona about yourself to survive. And I know that's not my mom. My mother's a giver. Anybody can say I need this, and she'll give it to them. So I was worried about her being taken advantage of. Like she stated earlier, she's been to battered women's shelters. She's been in rehab facilities, and, there's been harassment that's taken place in these places. And, my mother doesn't, she didn't know how to deal with those things. She would want to run from it instead of dealing with it face on and saying, hey, you're not going to do this to me. This is not the person that I am. That's who she's always been. So there was some worry on my end about her safety, about her health. She's, even before COVID, my mother's, she has heart conditions, and, she was on medication before, she was incarcerated. So that was a worry for me. But more so, of course, aside from her health, myself, my brother, like my mom said, my nephew passed away 2 days before she was arrested. She couldn't even go to his funeral. So to know that, and to know that my brother was suffering at the time, she couldn't even be there for him as a mother should be. And like Tewkunzi said earlier, that they don't know, the prison system doesn't know these women as individuals. They know them as an offender number. They know them as, someone who committed a crime. Okay, true as it may be, but they don't know their story. They don't know what they're removing them from. My mother's a big advocate, as she stated, she was in the process of wanting to take classes, computer classes, and wanting to do things to better herself. And in her case, this was a case from 2015 where she ran on a warrant. She didn't do anything, in between 2015 and 2018 to get arrested. But when she did, they didn't care that, for those 3 years, she'd been a productive citizen. She's been a part of her community. She's been an active, family member. They don't really see that part. So for me, it was hard. I had written letters to the warden, and, I even gave them paperwork from her at the time, from one of her counselors, that she was receiving outpatient therapy. But again, they even wrote back and said, well, at this time, there's nothing that we can do. So I was advocating for her as much as I can. But like Tewkunzi said, for women, especially of color, minorities, the resources are not there available for them. So it was kind of like I was trying to be tough and strong on this end, be there for her, And in the meantime, I'm literally thinking to myself, is my mother going to be gone for 6 years? Like, that was devastating. Like, there were nights where I would go in the bathroom and cry so my daughter wouldn't hear, and my husband would, try to, soothe me as much as he could. So it was really hard. It was really difficult. But I knew that somehow, I didn't know how, but I knew that at some point, God would send something and know that, my mother didn't deserve to be in a place like that for that length of time. So.
Great, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And you bring up, you bring up some good points too. And I'm gonna turn it to Tewkunzi, who was separated. You were separated from your baby, your son, your infant son, as well as your other family members. And I'd like to ask you to talk about how it was trying to raise your son and working with your family members. I know it's really hard, probably hard to talk about it. And because we can see how incarceration devastates a family in the short and long term, and that the legal system throws people away without understanding them and without regard for the family. And Vickie, in your case, your children were grown, your grandchildren were taken care of, but what happens when moms are incarcerated and they have infant children? Tewkunzi, can you give us your thoughts?
Well, it was hard. The first couple years, it was like really, really hard. Like, what I'm gonna do, every day I was calling home trying to see how he doing, or is he growing some teeth, growing the teeth now, or is he walking, just seeing the pictures, just hearing his voice, just seeing him making those steps when, just seeing him making those steps like he trying to walk when they take a picture of him. And I'm just so thankful for my mother, my grandmother, my sisters, my brothers. Like, as the years has grown and come by, they have played a major part in making sure that he was good. I could only say so. At the time, I could only say so much to stay involved in his life, to ask him what his favorite color, write a letter here and there, but most of the time I was on the phone with him on a daily basis, because I felt like that was my heart, and for him to get to know me, because some people, we just don't get to know our kids when, you put away. But I was so thankful that with my mother and my grandma, come from all the way from Mississippi to help. She got him, she made sure he had a roof over his head, making sure he had whatever he wanted. I have cousins who played a part, aunties, great aunts, his great aunts who played a big part to like keep him for the summer or the weekend, still just everybody pitched in like they say it's always take a village to raise a kid. And it was just so helpful the way that my mom, she stepped up so much that, them phone calls telling her and my grandma how much I appreciate them for, doing what they supposed to do as a mother and as a grandmother, as a great grandmother. And it just helped me so much, because it took a lot of relief out of me to know that my son is in safe hands, that I ain't got to worry about him in no foster care, being adopted, being taken away, never get to hear his voice or see him ever again. But when you got that family that just come through and to make sure everything is A-okay, they did an amazing job. They trying to keep him in sport, trying to keep his head in the right place. And without that, I don't know where I could have been at. I could have been messed up. But I was so thankful that the support of my family was there. They was 100. The letters that I was getting from some of it, even the ones that, were asking me about me on a daily basis, it was still love that was given from a distance. And you don't get that much, because, even though people look at, people probably had looked at me as, and she ain't got her child, but by the grace of God, I still had my child on a daily basis. To me, I still had my child on a daily basis, because I knew that he was in good hands from the person who raised me, from the two great women in my family who had raised me. No matter what, they still took initiative to come together to keep him right here with us. And I'm just so grateful for that. And nothing couldn't change that during my incarceration to make me believe that he wasn't A-okay, because he was all day, every day. He was okay. So I'm thankful for that. The years made me learn, but I had a mother that was there through them 13 and a half years who, and my grandmama who drove from Mississippi, her and my sister driving from Mississippi just so I could see my son. And then my mom, she would make sure I got to see him every weekend or every other weekend. As tired as she could be, she still made it happen. She still made a way for him to be in my life, for me to be able to see him. So my family was what's up at that time. My family was what's up them 13 and a half years. They could have been gone, but they were still there, still did what they supposed to do at auntie, uncles, great aunts, cousin, great uncles. They all did an amazing job to help in raising him.
Thank you. That's so powerful and so heartwarming too. And, I was able to meet a few of your family members at your hearing a while ago. And, I've known your story for a while, Tewkunzi. I met you in person at the hearing, and then I was able to visit you in Logan. And you've had other supporters too that you've been, you are a prolific letter writer. I've never met anybody who writes as many letters as you do, and has so many people who are like, oh, Tewkunzi sent me a letter, which is amazing. So can you tell me, how have supporters beyond your family helped you?
Oh my God, I don't even know where to start with this. It was just so amazing how the supporters came in. They, the first event had happened back in 2015. And with the first event that Love and Protect had held, I had like so many supporters that had wrote me, didn't even know who I was, but they told me, oh, I heard your story. You had even college students, high school students, everybody that was writing. And I remember this one lady, she had wrote me, and she told me, she said, well, as long as I can walk and breathe, I'm an older lady. I just hope that we can stay in contact, because it's just me and the cats and dogs here at the house. So it warmed my heart to know that it's people out there that's staying in a house that's alone. They probably need someone to talk to at times too. And through that first event, this one pen pal has stuck out, and me and him to this day are like best friends. And he's just so amazed. Like, he does one thing, he always was there for me from day one. And I talk about my friend Tom, he's a wonderful person. Like, he was there from day one, like with the support that he give, and that all these letters was steady coming in, like from all around the world, the country, like different organizations coming through, and they were just lifting my spirits up more than I was. And most of them say I was lifting their spirits up by continuing to write them on a weekly basis, or however things was getting done. But we was getting communication through, like they would send me books, they would send me pictures, they would just send me cards, and it was just so amazing. Like, they'll send me like an invitation for an event that's coming up. Like, I can't go to this event next week, but it'd be so funny because the supporter were always there to, help me out, to keep my mind going, to help them. And they was helping me as much as I was helping them, because some of the people that was writing me, I felt like they was family, because they was so open. They were so genuinely open about themselves and trying to get to know me instead of judging me or criticizing me or think the worst of me. And it was the same for me, because I felt like, yes, I had my family. My family was there. But the supporters, they put the icing on the cake, because they kept so many letters going. And like on a daily basis, those letters was like, wow, this me, saying, to know that somebody still care for you, somebody still, are thinking about you out here. They not giving up on you. I know my family wasn't giving up on me, but at the same time, the supporters was just right there 100, like, hey, we love you. We can't wait till you get home. And it was so special, because this one little girl, Deana, I think you had something in the card. This little girl had wrote me, and she told me, she said, I love you. And she said, I don't know you, but I love you, from the Chicago area. And that had made me cry so hard that day, because even a little kid, sending support and love. And she probably just in elementary school, but she's probably was there with her parent or whoever, but she still made my day. So the supporters that was reaching to me beyond, my incarceration, beyond my family, I thank them so much, because without them, this wouldn't have happened either for me to be home. But yes, I'm so blessed to still be in touch with someone to this day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Like I've said before, is that, the support we tried to support you, and you also supported us. It went both ways. And so it wasn't a one-way type of thing, at least in many of the folks that I know, that we appreciate your support too. Vickie, I'm going to ask you a similar question. You have the support of your daughter, and you had the support of your daughter, when you were incarcerated. She is sitting right next to you, so I should call her Simone instead of using pronouns. Simone was a huge advocate for you then, and really, worked to try to get Rachel and the Illinois Prison Project to join your team of support. So can you talk to me about that support from Simone and what it was like to get a call from Rachel and learn that IPP was going to help you get out?
I was on a unit one day, and they had a piece of paper on the desk, and one of the other inmates was screaming, "Hey, you want to get early release? Have your family member go on this website." So I called Simone right away, and I'm like, "Simone, go on this website, IPP Prison Project." And Simone, she said, I don't say the words right, downloaded it, because I'm not technology savvy. She downloaded it, and she says, "Mom," while she's putting in my information, she's like, "Mom, why hadn't you given me this before?" And I'm like, "Well, I just got it." And I think Simone got a call from Rachel that day.
Couple
days. And she said, "Rachel, I'm going to have a legal call." Well, I didn't know nothing about a legal call, but okay. Simone also would write counselors that I was seeing at my outpatient. So my daughter would be on the phone just calling people.
They knew me very well there.
Calling people. I was sentenced out of Champaign County, and unfortunately, my boyfriend at the time, the moment I was committing these crimes, going in Walmart, I was dealing with a guy. I didn't know he was touching my grandchildren. So at the same time, they had arrested him. So they knew about me and my warrant. And they just told my daughter, "Tell your mom to turn herself in." Simone would have a conversation with the district attorney that was handling him. And then that also had my case. And Simone was asking him, "Well, can't you help my mom, get out and get out of this, or help my mom, and stuff like that." And he was, like I said, she told my daughter, "Just have your mom turn herself in and we'll work something out." But I just wouldn't turn myself in. My daughter kept saying, "Mom, not to go in Walmart and the stores and stuff." Constantly, "Mom, stop. And I wouldn't listen. And so when I went to jail, I talked to my daughter every day. She was like, "Mom, you're gonna be okay." And Rachel, like I said, when she talked to Rachel after she put the website on, she talked to Rachel, and I had the legal call with Rachel. It was so, I felt so exhilarated. I felt like I could trust her instead of the other Caucasian people that I dealt with in the judicial system, which put me in jail. You understand what I'm saying? There was just so much trust there. And I loved it. My daughter supported me all the way, and my son. Yeah.
And if I can just add to that, even initially, when her case kind of came about, the public defender that they gave her had no idea about her case. And I get it. They have so many, their caseload is, extremely huge. So when she told me the sentencing, and I'm like, "Mom, wait a minute, that can't be right." Like, I knew off the bat, I'm not a judge or a jury or anything like that, but I knew that the sentencing that she got was not commensurate with what she did. So I immediately, tried to get on the phone and try to, contact some lawyers. But of course, there's fees associated with that, with obviously we didn't have that money at the time. So when we found out about the Illinois Prison Project, and I told her, hey mom, they contacted me, I can just, even though I couldn't see her, I could hear the light in her voice. She finally felt like, okay, well, maybe this is a chance. And, you know, like she said, me and her would talk anyway every day. And that became a huge part of our discussion. Well, have you heard from them? What do they need? And, you know, once I spoke with Rachel, and anything that they asked me to do, I would make sure paperwork, I would get stuff from her doctors. And, you know, like I said, even the counselors and the people answering the phone in Decatur Correctional, they even started knowing me because I was calling them so often to try to figure out what was going on, and, you know, to get the paperwork and the information that you guys needed to help her out.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that perspective, because I feel like it's often the work that people on the outside are doing for the folks on the inside is lost on the legal system, that they don't realize the time that it takes to do these things to support the folks on the inside, when really, you know, people should not be in prison. So thank you for pointing that out. We're going to, I'm going to ask a wrap-up question to both of you. I'm going to ask it and then I'm going to say something, and we'll start with Tewkunzi. So both of you have talked about the things you have done and done in prison, the different skills that you have gained, different perspectives that you have gained. I want to know, like, how are you translating that work to the outside, or what you are doing? And also, and this is an audience question, part of an audience question, what are some things that have grounded you and contributed to your healing process on the outside? So those might be combined. And then while you're thinking about answers to those questions, I want to point out that a lot of the people in the chat and listening, I'm sure, have made a lot of comments to you that none of this is your fault, and that you deserved support, not a conviction. And Vickie, even in your video that I watched with you and Simone, you even said, and this is, I mean, stuck with me, I might get a tattoo, you are not your worst mistake. That's really powerful, right? You are not your worst mistake. Yeah, that's really powerful. So thank you for that. So Tewkunzi, what are you what are you doing now? What are some of your things that you're bringing outside, and you're building, you're blooming? Tell us.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm working, helping with the group, this film group with my best friend and another young partner. Working on a documentary. Also, I've been doing a little work with some of the mothers who are kind of young that have sons that are going to prison right now, and just basic help, helping some others right now who got kids who is going to prison, and what they should expect, and not to freak out right away. You know, I know it's a worrying process because the men's correctional center is different from women's. So the ones who are, you know, been asking about, you know, little things and who they need to talk to, I'm on board to always talking to help people ease their minds and answer any question the best way I can for the moment, you know, doing a little African work beyond to help other mothers. Also, just been, you know, trying to get this new campaign that I've been wanting to do for years off the ground. Hopefully we could do that for Women's Month. The campaign.
Oh, your mic went out again. Oh, you were talking about the women's campaign. Okay. Okay, we can hear you now.
I'm back. Well, I'm trying to do this campaign project for next month for women who's in similar situations, or women who have basically been killed by the hands of a man while they was pregnant, for either being the wife, the mistress. Most of it that I found out was most of the people that was in a single relationship and not married, and women who was mistress who got killed by the hands of a man, pregnant, or because they have a baby by a man and the man want to have so much control over their life, such as somewhat that I had in a situation where I was being controlled in my life by a man. Anybody can manipulate you at the time. So I'm working big part on that, trying to get that ready for next month. That's one of my biggest goals, to help it called the Heartbreaking Campaign.
Your mic went out again. Oh, looks like you froze. Tewkunzi, we'll come back to you to hear more about the event. Vickie, tell us how the skills and perspectives from inside translated to the outside, and what has grounded you and started your healing process.
Well, before coming to prison, I had used drugs, hardcore heroin and crack for the 20 years before I went to prison. And I used that opportunity to get clean. I needed long-term cleanness to think clear about Vickie. I started going to, like I said, a lot of self-help groups, life skills, moving on. I went to school. I went to class before I went to jail, I did 2.5 years of college, but the drugs just ravaged my mind, made me forgetful. And I went back to school while I was in prison to gain a better perspective on Vickie. My kids are okay. My grandchildren, my sisters, my brothers. I'm learning about Vickie and what makes Vickie. I changed the way I had to change the way I thought about myself, my self-worth. I gained a better perspective on not to think negative and to love myself. So I learned that in prison. Me and a lot of the other women, we learned how to prioritize our life, lower some expectations, and be a better person. And that's what I'm working on. That's why I'm going to counseling in the summertime. Simone and I talk about going to, I go to AA and NA out when the world opens back up. I have a little business where I sell snow cones and nachos, and I give back to the community. I was telling Simone, maybe we can go to one of the shelters and help feed some of the homeless and some of the battered women. I give $1 here or $2 there when I can, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I mean, again, both of you working for others is amazing. And Tewkunzi, I think your mic is working again. So can you finish up what you were saying about the campaign you're launching at Women's History Month?
Yeah, it's a campaign for the heartbreaking campaigns for women who have been abused by the hands of a man, women who've been pregnant or had a child by a man. It's kind of like totally like it's girls been coming up missing, or they end up dead because the man that they might be a mistress to, a girlfriend to, who want total control of their life, end up either they're dead or the woman, she's in prison for protecting her life, defending her life. So the Heartbreaking campaign is due to the it's kind of like more for women's who's living in a single life and who's in a discouraged way of trying to be secure under the hands of a man. And it's just so heartbreaking to a lot of people out here in the world that some women belittle themselves for guys who need so much control in their life and who feel like, you know, even if you was cheating on your wife or your man or so, you feel like the next woman that end up pregnant by you, you know, that end up pregnant and she get killed by the hands while she's pregnant, and here go two people had lost their life, a woman and a child. So the Heartbreaking campaign is based around that kind of domestic situation, because I also had been beaten while I was pregnant, you know, being in the hospital, was in the hospital for months. My son ended up as a premature baby, which he was also in the hospital for a while. So the Heartbreaking campaign is something big for me, just to get out there, to get that energy back from women who had also dealt with the same type of things that I had dealt with. So that's something that's I want to do to help other women who've been in domestic situation while they was pregnant or just with the infant child.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And folks are asking for more information. So if you want to if you have a link or more information where people can support that, please put that in the chat. Vickie and Simone, if you have links or information you want to share, please drop that in the chat too for our audience. And before I hand it back over to the Illinois Prison Project, I just want to say a huge thank you to Tewkunzi, Vickie, and Simone for being here, sharing your stories, and just being out and being free and being on this earth. So, folks in virtual land, if you can show your love in the chat for our 3 guests, that'd be great. And I'm going to hand it over to folks at the Illinois Prison Project.
Before you do that, my mom just had one other quick
thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Rachel White Domain. I also wanted to thank the Women's Survivors Project. I also wanted to really thank the Access to Justice Funds. I also want to really thank the Illinois Prison Project. And most of all, I want to give thanks to God and to my daughter. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us and allowing us to take part in this wonderful event. So we appreciate you guys.
Thank you for taking part in it. We couldn't be here. We couldn't do it without you. And as Mariame started off the night by saying, we are following you and taking your leadership. And I also want to take the moment to thank Deana Lewis, our incredible host for the evening. I am just going to imagine in my mind that all of you folks in Zoom land are clapping your hands or otherwise celebrating Deana for all of her incredible work to walk us through this event. I appreciate you so much. I've been texting nice things about you and everybody else on this call over the entire event, just appreciating all of you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna close out this event. We'll close out this event with a couple of words from our Director of Education, Ronaldo Hudson, who will join me here in just a second. Ronaldo is an incredible human being. You can be on your camera if you'd like to. I am really grateful to know you. Ronaldo is not only on staff as the Director of Education at IPP, but also an educator, minister, community organizer. He is also a former client of IPP, having served 37 years in the Department of Corrections. And we do a lot of events where folks get to hear a lot more from Ronaldo, so please do follow us so you can hear from him more tonight, more than you'll hear from him tonight. But for night, he'll be sharing some concluding remarks and sending us off for the evening. So Ronaldo, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Man, thank you. Like, this is so awesome. I just stopped crying, ladies. So thank you for making me cry. Like, and y'all have shutting me up. Like y'all cooked the gumbo. It's done. It's ready to be served. Like, to say you guys are awesome, to say you are amazing is no exaggeration. You are amazing and we love you. And I just want to say, I support you, we support you. And after this event, the world is going to support you. And so I just want to say to the world, like, you can follow us, and help us spread the word. It doesn't cost anything, but it's so important by sharing our contents, education is so important. It helps other people understand what we're trying to do. You can become a pen pal for someone incarcerated. It's so, when you think about Tewkunzi, as she talked about how she write those letters make a difference. So make the contact with someone, because that relationship can also be wonderful for you and it can help you. And invite us to speak. Listen to these women, like, it was amazing. Invite them to speak at your church, and invite them to speak at your schools. Invite wherever you have an open, invite them, because their message need to be heard. The message of domestic violence and the mistreatment of women need to be heard. And these women told it so eloquently, and I'm so humbled by that, And so I say, invite us to the churches. And finally, if you're able, please consider making a donation. I heard an amazing donation earlier, $5,000. I'm not saying to anyone what you should do, but follow your heart, right? That was amazing, and I'm so humbled by that, right? And I would say to you, like, the Illinois Prisoner Project does not use your money unwisely. Every penny, everything you donate will go to help bring more beautiful women home. And how could it be more greatly used than to bring these suffering women home? And so I'm just so humble. And listen, I'm just leaving it there because I'm about to start crying. And I don't want y'all to see me cry, because I was telling Vickie, don't cry, and it's okay, but I'm sorry. Like, thank you, and I love you. Like, don't leave me alone. I love y'all.
Yeah, I was grateful to have my camera off for a lot of that event because I was feeling the same way, Ronaldo. So I think we'll just close out with all of the love. I've been just absolutely overwhelmed by this beautiful chat tonight. Everybody's sharing so much love with Tewkunzi and Vickie. I know you've been working this whole time, speaking, educating us. So we'll have to send you a transcript of all of the love that's been shared in this chat. Thank you both so much. Thanks for everybody for being on. Follow us on Illinois Prison Project and join us at our next event. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay,
You
everybody,
too.
good night.
Good night.
Good night. Love
Hopefully
you guys.
no more snow, right? Can't take any more. Stay safe.
Stay safe, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.